Babylon, June 323 BC. The air inside the palace is still. It smells of cedarwood and fever and something older, the particular stillness of a room where a great man is dying and everyone knows it. You are standing near the back. You have a name, a rank, a sword that has killed men on 3 continents. You have marched from Macedonia to the edge of India and back again, and you are still alive, which means you are one of the lucky ones or one of the ruthless ones, and in this room right now, there is no difference between those 2 things. In front of you on a low bed surrounded by gold and incense and the soft sound of men trying not to breathe too loudly is Alexander. He is 32 years old. He has conquered more of the world than any man who has ever lived. He destroyed the Persian Empire. He crossed the Hindu Kush in winter. He stood at the banks of the Ipsus River at the edge of the known world and looked east and wanted more. His men refused to follow him any further, and even the one battle he ever lost, was not fought on a field. It was fought in a tent, with words. And now he cannot lift his hand. For 10 days he has been slipping. Fever first, then weakness, then silence. The man who once shouted across a battlefield so loudly his troops could hear him over the crash of iron, he cannot speak anymore. The generals have been filing past him for days, taking his hand, looking at his face, looking for something in his eyes that might answer the question no one wants to ask out loud. Someone finally asks it. They lean close. The words are soft, almost whispered. To whom do you leave the empire? Alexander opens his eyes. He looks at the man. His lips move. Something comes out, a sound, a breath, a word, so faint that the men closest to him lean in and still cannot hear it clearly. The historians will argue about what he said for the next 2,000 years. The most common account is this: to the strongest. Some say he added a name. Some say he said nothing coherent at all. Some say the question was never even asked, that it's a story invented later to explain what happens next. What happens next is this: his hand goes still. The room fills with sound, weeping, the clattering of men moving, shifting, looking at each other, the noise of a political structure that has just lost the only thing holding it together. In that moment, in that exact, specific, unrepeatable moment, the largest empire the world has ever seen develops a crack that runs all the way from Macedonia to the Indus River. Not because of an enemy at the gate, not because of plague or famine or a catastrophic defeat on a battlefield, because the men who loved Alexander, who followed him, bled for him, who believed in him with something that was half loyalty and half religious devotion, could not agree on who among them deserved to inherit what he built. What happens next is not a succession. It is a slow, methodical, decades-long butchery. How do you destroy the greatest empire in history? You don't need a foreign conqueror. You don't need a plague to sweep through the population. You don't need a catastrophic military defeat, a breach of the walls, an enemy general marching in triumph through your capital. You need a room full of ambitious men, no clear air, and a single afternoon. By the time Alexander's body is cold, his closest friends have already chosen sides. By the time he is buried, and this will take years because the burial itself becomes a weapon in a war, 6 of his generals will be dead. 2 of them murdered by men they trusted. 1 of them by his own officers, in his own tent, in the middle of a campaign he launched to hold the empire together. The bloodline of Alexander, his wife, his son, his mother, his half-brother, every last member of the Argead royal family will be hunted down and killed. Not by foreign enemies, not by conquered peoples rising up, by the men who swore to protect them. Men who sat at Alexander's table, who shared his campaigns, who called themselves his friends. The world Alexander built did not fall to an external force. It was consumed from within by the very people he trusted most. This is the story of the Diadochi, the Successors. This is the story of how the world was divided and what that division cost. If you're new here, this channel covers real history, the full story. No shortcuts. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because this one gets very dark very fast. To understand what breaks, you have to understand what Alexander actually built. Not just territory. Territory is just land, and land changes hands. What Alexander created was something far more fragile and far more powerful than a map. He built a system of loyalty so completely constructed around one man that when that man died, the system had nothing, no institution, no law, no shared culture, to hold it together in his absence. Consider what the empire actually looked like in June of 323 BC. It stretched from Macedonia, a cold, mountain-edged kingdom at the northern margin of the Greek world, east to the Indus River Valley in what is now Pakistan. It swallowed the whole of the Persian Empire. It contained Egypt and its grain, Babylon and its wealth, the silver mines of Bactria, the cedar forests of Lebanon. The trade routes of the entire known world ran through it like blood vessels. It was, by every measurable standard, the largest contiguous empire that had ever existed on Earth. And it was held together by exactly one thing: Alexander himself. Not a shared legal code, not a unified religion, not a common language. The empire contained Greek speakers and Persian speakers and Aramaic speakers and Egyptian speakers and dozens of others, each with their own gods and customs and histories. The Macedonian administrative system that Alexander had imposed was thin, efficient in places, improvised in others. He had kept many Persian governors in their positions because they were competent and because he was always moving, always pushing further east, never staying in one place long enough to build the kind of deep institutional structures that hold empires together across generations. What held all of it together was the fact that Alexander was simultaneously the king of Macedonia, which gave him legitimacy in the Macedonian tradition, the pharaoh of Egypt, accepted as the son of Amun by the Egyptian priests, the great king of Persia, inheritor of Darius, ruler by right of conquest, the liberator of the Greek city-states, according to his own propaganda, though the Greek cities had somewhat more complicated feelings about this, and the son of Zeus, according to the oracle at Siwa in Egypt, which Alexander visited early in his Egyptian campaign and which changed something in him permanently. He was not just a ruler. He was the axis around which every other political reality in the ancient world now rotated. Remove him from that system, and you have 30 different political structures that share nothing except the memory of the man who forced them together. And into that vacuum step roughly a dozen men who are brilliant, battle-tested, deeply ambitious, and now, for the first time in their adult lives, genuinely free. These men are the Diadochi, the Successors. Learn their names. Each one of them is about to make a decision that will determine what the world looks like for the next 300 years. Perdiccas. He is the man with the ring. In Alexander's final hours, the signet ring, the seal of royal authority, the instrument of royal power, is said to have been given to Perdiccas. Or he took it. The accounts differ. The result is the same. The ring is on his finger, and that means something. He is not the most popular man in the room. He is not the most powerful in terms of armies. He is not the one the soldiers love the way they loved Craterus or Hephaestion. But he is intelligent. He has Alexander's final formal gesture of trust, and he genuinely believes, or appears to genuinely believe, that the empire can be held together under a single regent until a legitimate heir is old enough to rule. He will spend 2 years attempting this. He will be murdered for it. Ptolemy. He is the one you should watch. He stands near the back of these early meetings, quiet, composed, asking questions rather than making speeches. He is not performing calm. He actually is calm. He is calm because he has already made his decision, and his decision does not depend on what anyone else in this room does. He wants Egypt. He has wanted Egypt for some time. He understands Egypt the way a general understands terrain, its advantages, its defensibility, its wealth. The Nile Delta is surrounded by desert on 3 sides and sea on the 4th. To invade Egypt, you have to want it very badly and be willing to march very far in very harsh conditions. Ptolemy is thinking about longevity. He is thinking decades ahead, while others are thinking weeks ahead. He will be right. Antigonus. 1 eye. The other lost in battle years before Alexander's campaigns. His remaining eye compensates by missing nothing. He is older than the others, already in his 60s when Alexander dies. He has the patience that comes from having already outlived several men who underestimated him. He is not reckless. He is not impulsive. He makes long calculations and pursues them relentlessly. He wants everything. Not a piece of the empire. All of it. He will spend 22 years, and the entirety of his considerable abilities attempting to reconstruct Alexander's domain under his own authority. He he will come closer than anyone. Seleucus. He is quiet now. He is watching. He commands the companion cavalry, Alexander's elite shock force, the most prestigious military appointment in the army. He is competent. He is well regarded. He is not yet the figure he will become. What he will become is the founder of a dynasty that outlasts every other successor state, controls more territory than any of them, and bridges Greek and Persian civilization in ways that will shape the Middle East for centuries. But that is much later. Right now, he is watching. Cassander. He was not on the campaigns. He is the son of Antipater, the old Macedonian general Alexander left in charge of the home kingdom while he marched east. Cassander stayed behind. He managed logistics and administration. He was not at Gaugamela. He was not at the Hydaspes. He did not stand in the ruins of Persepolis. He is acutely, almost pathologically aware of this fact. The men in this room have a bond, the bond of shared suffering, shared danger, shared triumph that he is permanently excluded from. He sees it in how they look at each other, speak to each other, remember things together. He is deeply, carefully, methodically resentful of all of it. He will prove to be the most cold-blooded person in a story that has no shortage of cold-blooded people. Eumenes. He is the one who does not belong here, and he knows it. He is Greek, not Macedonian, from a small city called Cardia in Thrace. He came into Alexander's service as a secretary, a chief of staff, a logistics coordinator, the man who kept the records and wrote the letters and managed the flow of information through the campaign. The Macedonian generals never fully trusted him. He was educated where they were warriors. He was diplomatic where they were blunt. He was the wrong nationality, the wrong background, the wrong kind of person for this kind of room. He was also quietly one of the most capable men Alexander had. And unlike every other person in this story, he actually believed in the empire, not as a vehicle for personal advancement, not as territory to be administered. He believed in the Argead royal line, in the legitimacy of Alexander's heirs, in the idea that what Alexander built was worth preserving. He will fight for that belief for years, with no support structure, surrounded by enemies, declared an outlaw. And he will be betrayed by the men he was fighting to protect. The body is not yet cold when the fighting starts. Not physical fighting. Not yet. This is political fighting, which in the Macedonian tradition means men standing in large rooms making speeches at each other, with weapons visible at their hips. The central question is simple. So simple it has no good answer. Who rules? Alexander had a half-brother, Philip Aridaeus, son of Philip II, by a different woman, alive, present in Babylon. But Philip suffered from some kind of mental or developmental condition. The ancient sources are vague and occasionally unkind about the nature of it, but they are consistent that he was not capable of ruling in any meaningful sense. He could be a king. He could be a symbol. He could be useful to whoever controlled him, but he could not govern. Alexander also had a pregnant wife, Roxana, a Bactrian princess he had married in 327 BC. She was visibly pregnant, but no one knew yet if the child would be a boy, and even if it was a boy, a Macedonian army was not going to wait years for an infant to come of age with no clear authority structure in place. And Alexander had said, or was reported to have said, to the strongest, which was either a genuine political statement, an expression of philosophical resignation, or something he never actually said at all. Into this vacuum, three positions emerged. Perdiccas argued for waiting. Hold authority collectively until Roxana's child is born. If it is a boy, he is king. Perdiccas serves as regent. The empire continues under the fiction of unified Argead rule. The cavalry commanders, who were mostly Macedonian nobles, the aristocratic officer class, supported this. A man named Meleger argued for immediacy. The army could not wait for an unborn child. Philip Aridaeus was a man of the blood, however limited. Declare him king now. Today, the infantry supported Meleger, and the infantry, which means the mass of the army, the phalanx, the tens of thousands of soldiers who were not cavalry officers, carried an enormous amount of weight. They were the ones who had done the dying. This was not about Philip. No one actually cared about Philip. This was about factions. If Perdiccas held the regency for an unborn child with cavalry support, the infantry was politically irrelevant. Meleager was trying to establish infantry authority before the settlement was made. For 3 days, the two factions faced each other in Babylon. Swords were drawn. There were moments where it could have gone either way. A compromise was reached, as compromises always are, not because anyone was satisfied, but because everyone was frightened of what the alternative looked like. A civil war in Babylon, with Alexander's body still warm, would have destroyed everything immediately. Philip Aridaeus would be declared co-king, Philip III of Macedon. When Roxana's child arrived, if male, he would be co-king as well. Two kings, neither capable of ruling jointly on a throne. Perdiccas would be regent for both. Meleager would have a formal position, a face-saving role. Nothing real. The compromise lasted about a week. Then Perdiccas had Meleager arrested on a charge of treason, tried by the Macedonian assembly, and executed. The first death of the succession crisis is a Macedonian general killed by another Macedonian general in the throne room of Babylon. It will not be the last. With the succession question temporarily papered over, the generals divided the empire. This is the Partition of Babylon, 323 BC. On paper, it was an administrative arrangement. The empire remained unified. Philip III and the infant Alexander IV, born a few months after his father's death, Roxana's child, a boy as Perdiccas had hoped, were the joint kings. Perdiccas was their regent. The generals were satraps, governors of their respective regions, nominally answerable to central authority. In practice, everyone in the room understood it was a division. No one said so. Saying so would require admitting that the empire was already over, and no one was ready to admit that yet. Ptolemy received Egypt. He had lobbied for it with the specific targeted energy of a man who has made his decision and intends to get what he came for. The other generals, preoccupied with larger and more glamorous provinces, seemed not to have understood what he was really asking for. Egypt seemed like a manageable peripheral prize. Ptolemy understood that it was a fortress. Antigonus received Phrygia, Lycia and Pamphylia, substantial territories across what is now western Turkey. Strategic, wealthy, centrally positioned for future operations. Lysimachus received Thrace, the region between Macedonia and the Black Sea. Craterus, enormously popular with the troops, was given a senior position alongside Antipater in Macedonia itself. This was a recognition of his standing with the army, more than a specific administrative role. Eumenes received Cappadocia and Paphlagonia. The problem was that neither territory was under Macedonian control. He was being given the task of conquering his own provinces before he could govern them. Whether this was a test of his capabilities or a way of keeping the troublesome Greek busy and far away from the important decisions is unclear. It may have been both. Seleucus retained command of the companion cavalry, the military role, not a territory. He was waiting. Perdiccas had the ring, the title of regent, the nominal authority over everyone. He had no territory of his own, no army loyal specifically to him. His authority existed only as long as the others chose to acknowledge it. He must have known this. He was intelligent enough to know this. He decided that the way to make his authority real was to demonstrate it. The way to demonstrate it was to act. The way to act was to marry into the bloodline. We're going deep on this one. If you want to support the channel, extended breakdowns, maps of the succession wars, and early access to upcoming videos, the membership link is in the description. It keeps this work going. Before any army crosses any border, before any battle is fought, the first major act of the succession wars is something that sounds almost farcical. Someone steals Alexander's body. This requires context. In the Macedonian tradition, and in several of the cultures Alexander had absorbed and incorporated into his identity, the burial place of a king was sacred. Not metaphorically sacred. Politically, practically, functionally sacred. The tomb of a divine king was a center of religious authority. Pilgrims came to it. Legitimacy flowed from it. To control the tomb of a god king was to have a claim on his mantle. Perdiccas understood this. He had been planning with great care an elaborate funeral cortege. Alexander's body would travel from Babylon to Macedonia to be interred at Aegi, the ancient burial ground of Macedonian kings where Philip II lay, where all the Argids lay. This was the correct, the legitimate, the politically powerful choice. The funeral carriage they built was extraordinary. We have a description of it that survives in the ancient sources. A golden sarcophagus. a vaulted roof of gold and precious stones, columns supporting the vault wreathed in golden vines. Along the sides, painted panels depicting Alexander in battle, Alexander receiving the submission of conquered peoples, Alexander among his generals. At each corner, golden statues of Nike, goddess of victory, holding up the roof. The carriage was pulled by 64 mules. Each mule wore a crown of gold. Each wore a collar of bells, so that you could hear the procession coming from miles away. It was the most elaborate funeral cortege the ancient world had ever constructed. It never arrived in Macedonia. Ptolemy intercepted it. Somewhere in Syria, the exact location is disputed. Ptolemy's agents, or Ptolemy himself, diverted the procession. The carriage turned south instead of west, toward Egypt. Alexander was taken to Memphis first, the old capital, the heart of Egypt. He was received there as a pharaoh with full Egyptian religious rites, which Ptolemy had arranged in advance. The priests of Egypt had reasons of their own to welcome the son of Amun home. Later, when the city was ready, when the tomb was complete, Alexander was moved to Alexandria, the city he had founded himself that bore his name on the western edge of the Nile Delta. There Ptolemy built him a tomb, a royal tomb, in the center of Alexandria, which was already becoming the most important city in the Mediterranean world. And there Alexander stayed. For centuries, visitors would come to see the tomb. Julius Caesar came. Augustus came and reportedly broke the nose off the mummy, trying to pay his respects by touching it. The tomb was a destination, a shrine, a statement. And the statement it made was this: the legitimate heir of Alexander is the man who guards him. Perdiccas had the ring. Ptolemy had the body. In a contest between those two things, the body wins. Perdiccas could not let this stand. To let it stand was to concede the most powerful symbolic resource in the known world. He chose war. 321 BC. Perdiccas leads an army into Egypt. He has legal justification. Ptolemy's seizure of Alexander's body was an act of treason against the central authority, technically against the kings, which means against Perdiccas as regent. He has a righteous cause, a real army, and the formal authority of the regency behind him. He has no luck at all. The army marches across the Sinai and reaches the Nile. The river in flood season is wide, fast, and carrying more water than usual. They need to cross. Perdiccas scouts the crossing points. He chooses a place called the Camel's Ford. The current is stronger than the scouts reported. The first men in are swept downstream. The formation breaks as men try to fight the river instead of using it. Equipment goes. Horses panic. And then the crocodiles. The Nile in the ancient world was full of Nile crocodiles. Not the relatively modest animals you might imagine. Nile crocodiles are the largest crocodilian species in the world. In this era, before centuries of hunting reduced their numbers, they were present in the Nile in enormous quantities. They are ambush predators. They take prey from the water's edge and beneath the surface. They move in groups when prey is abundant. Soldiers crossing a flooding river in full bronze armor, some already struggling against the current, splashing, creating the vibrations that attract crocodiles. The Nile took them. The ancient sources give us a specific number, more than 2,000 dead at the crossing. 2,000 men lost to a river. Not to Ptolemy's army, which was waiting and watching from the other bank. To the river itself. Perdiccas orders a second attempt at a different crossing point. It goes worse. More men. More horses. The army is beginning to understand that their general has led them to a disaster that has nothing to do with the enemy. In military history, there is a specific kind of failure that destroys commanders absolutely. Not defeat in battle, but death through incompetence. Soldiers can forgive a general who loses a battle. They cannot forgive a general who drowns them for nothing. The army pulls back. They are demoralized, depleted, and angry. And in that anger, a calculation is made. 3 of Perdiccas' senior officers, Ptolemy coordinating from across the river, Seleucus and Python on Perdiccas' own side, organize what comes next. It is quiet. It happens at night. There is no trial, no formal accusation, no assembly of the army called to witness. Officers enter Perdiccas' tent. They kill him, the man who held Alexander's signet ring. The man who spent 2 years trying to hold the empire together through the force of his own conviction and the fiction of central authority. The man who genuinely believed, or seemed to genuinely believe, that one more right decision, one more successful campaign, one more demonstration of legitimate power would stabilize everything. He is stabbed to death by his own officers in Egypt. He is the first of Alexander's senior generals to die in the succession wars. He will not be the last. With Perdiccas dead, the empire needs a new arrangement. The surviving generals meet in 321 BC at a place called Triparadisus, somewhere in modern Syria or Lebanon, though the exact site has never been confirmed. They carry out a second partition. Power is redistributed. The pretense of unified empire is maintained. Antipater, ancient, exhausted, the man who kept Macedonia functioning for the decade Alexander was in Asia, becomes the new regent. He is nearly 80 years old. He has been governing in Alexander's name for so long that he barely remembers what it felt like to have a king actually present. Antigonus is given command of the royal army in Asia, the largest and most battle-hardened force in the world. This is a meaningful appointment. It means he has soldiers. Seleucus receives Babylon. He has wanted a territory of his own. He now has one. The settlement holds for approximately 1 year. Then Antipater dies. He does not pass the regency to his son Cassander, who expected it, who believed it was owed to him, who had organized his entire political life around the assumption of eventually inheriting his father's authority. He passes it to a man named Polypertian, an older general. A safe choice, Antipater believed. A caretaker. Cassander stands at his father's deathbed and understands that he has been bypassed. Humiliated. That the position he was owed has been given to someone else. He does not weep. He begins to plan. While the Macedonian generals tear each other apart over regencies and territories and river crossings, one man is fighting a different war entirely. Eumenes of Cardia is fighting for the idea of the empire itself. He is on paper a dead man. When Perdiccas was killed, the generals who killed him declared Eumenes a public enemy. He had been loyal to Perdiccas. He had been fighting for the regent's authority in Asia Minor while Perdiccas marched to his death in Egypt. The declaration against him carries a death sentence and a price on his head. He doesn't run. In 320 BC, Eumenes meets Craterus in battle in Asia Minor. Craterus is everything Eumenes is not. He is Macedonian. He was one of Alexander's most trusted and beloved generals. The troops adored him with the kind of loyalty that belonged to only 2 or 3 men in the entire army. He was the general soldiers told stories about, whose name made men march harder. Eumenes wins. Craterus is killed in the fighting, thrown from his horse, trampled in the chaos of the cavalry engagement. When Eumenes finds him still alive on the field, he stays with him until he dies. He weeps by the ancient account. He holds the body with genuine grief. He had respected Craterus. He had not wanted to fight him. He had in fact tried to negotiate a settlement before the battle and been refused. But the death of Craterus does something to the army that Eumenes had not calculated. Soldiers who had followed him into the battle, soldiers who had accepted the logic of his cause, turn against him personally when they understand who is dead. You could fight anyone in Alexander's army. You could not, in the eyes of many of these men, have killed Craterus and remain anything but a villain. Eumenes retreats. He is chased across Asia Minor. He is cornered in a fortress called Nora in Cappadocia, a nearly impregnable position in the mountains, supplied with enough food to last a siege, but surrounded by enemies. He holds Nora for more than a year. His army inside the fortress exercises horses on a treadmill arrangement to keep them fit in the confined space. Eumenes conducts diplomatic negotiations through the walls, playing his besiegers against each other, buying time. He is eventually captured. He comes within hours of execution. Antigonus, who has him, decides he is more useful alive. He is too talented to kill without a compelling reason. He escapes before that calculation changes. What Eumenes does next is genuinely remarkable. With no territory, no base of power, declared an outlaw by the majority of Alexander's surviving generals, he travels east, to the upper satrapies, the deep eastern provinces of the former Persian Empire, Bactria and Persia and Susiana. There he finds something the Macedonian generals have neglected: the silver shields. They are the remnant of Alexander's hypaspists. the elite infantry brigade that Alexander used for the hardest, most demanding assault missions of his entire campaign. They are old now. They have been fighting for most of their adult lives, from Greece to India and back. They are in their 40s and 50s, many of them. They are enormously experienced, enormously capable, and they have accumulated over decades of campaigning a very large amount of plunder. They also remember what Alexander stood for, and when Eumenes appeals to them, not in his own name, but in the name of the kings, in the name of the Argead line, in the name of the empire that their service and suffering had built, they listen. Eumenes builds an army in the east. He fights Antigonus to a standstill at the Battle of Paratocene in 317 BC. The tactical result is inconclusive. Both sides claim victory. Both sides retreat to winter quarters. In 316 BC they fight again at Gabiene. Eumenes' tactics are better. The battle is close. But during the fighting, Antigonus's cavalry manages to capture the Silver Shield's baggage train, everything they own, decades of accumulated plunder, the material evidence of their entire lives' work. The Silver Shields make a decision. They negotiate with Antigonus. They surrender Eumenes in exchange for their baggage. A man who spent years fighting for their cause, who won battles for them, who kept faith with the idea they claimed to believe in, they trade him for their luggage. Antigonus has Eumenes executed. He is strangled or perhaps beheaded, the sources disagree. He is buried with honor, which is the least and the most Antigonus could do. Then Antigonus takes the Silver Shields and posts them to the most dangerous frontier assignment in the Eastern Empire, the hardest posting, the one from which men did not come back. He does not want them either. You do not keep men who betray. While the generals maneuver and fight and negotiate, something quieter is happening to the Argead royal family. They are being systematically killed. This is not incidental. It is not a side effect of the chaos. It is policy. Understand what the royal family represents. As long as any member of Alexander's bloodline is alive, they are a legitimate claim. Whoever holds them has a political tool, a symbol of rightful authority that can be deployed against rivals. They are useful, and they are dangerous, and they are fragile, and these facts together make them targets. The logic that several of the Diadochi arrive at, independently, over the course of a decade, is the same. The symbol must be removed. Philip III, teen BC. Alexander's half-brother. Coking. Used as a puppet and a banner by competing factions for 6 years, never actually governing anything, moved from location to location by whoever held the physical authority over the royal court. He is killed in 317 BC, on the orders of Olympias. Alexander's mother has returned from Epirus, where she retreated when Antipater's faction was ascendant. She comes back with an army, with connections, with 50 years of political experience, and the cold fury of a woman who watched her son's legacy being carved up by men who called themselves his friends. She has Philip killed. This is defensible from a certain angle. Philip was being used by Cassander's faction as a weapon against the Argead line, against the infant Alexander IV, and removing him removes that weapon. She has Philip's wife Eurydice killed. She has 300 of Cassander's supporters executed in Macedonia. She believes she is protecting her grandson. She believes she is clearing the board for the legitimate heir. She has instead handed Cassander exactly what he needed, a justification. Olympias 16 BC. Cassander brings an army to Macedonia. He besieges Olympias in the city of Pydna. The siege is methodical. He does not storm the walls. He waits. The city starves. The ancient sources record the stages of starvation with clinical precision. First, the food stores empty. Then the pack animals are slaughtered and eaten. Then the animals die from their own lack of food. By the end, people in Pydna are eating what cannot be named. Olympias attempts to negotiate. She proposes surrender on the condition that her life be guaranteed. Cassander agrees. He takes her into custody. He convenes a trial before the Macedonian Assembly, the formal body of soldiers and citizens who had the right to judge capital cases under Macedonian tradition. The charge is the murder of Philip III, the murder of Eurydice, the murder of the 300. She is convicted. Cassander will not execute her himself. He sends the families of her victims, the people whose fathers and brothers and sons died by her order. She is executed in the street. By every account we have, she refuses to beg. She refuses to weep. She does not kneel. She is killed standing up. She was approximately 60 years old. She was the wife of Philip II of Macedon. She was the mother of Alexander the Great. Cassander buries her without ceremony. That leaves Roxana and her son. Alexander IV is by every standard of Macedonian law and custom the legitimate heir. He is the biological son of Alexander the Great by his first and primary wife. He is recognized as co-king. He is the reason the infant kingship fiction has been maintained for a decade. He is in 310 BC approximately 13 years old. In another 2 years he will be of age. He will need to be presented to the army. He will need to be recognized. He will need to become real in a way that the abstract title has never required him to be real. Cassander cannot allow this. A real Alexander IV, present, visible, recognized by the army, ends Cassander's power absolutely. Everything Cassander has built depends on the royal line remaining theoretical. The moment it becomes actual, he becomes the man who murdered the mother of the king, and is therefore, by any measure, a traitor. The solution is simple. It is terrible. It is the kind of decision that happens quietly. Roxana and Alexander IV are in Cassander's custody. They have been for years, in a fortress at Amphipolis, officially under protective custody, officially safe, officially waiting for the moment when the politics are stable enough for the king to take his throne. In 310 BC they are poisoned. Both of them. Mother and son. Cassander does not announce this. This is important. He does not declare the Arged line extinct. He does not hold a ceremony or issue a proclamation. He simply makes the deaths happen and says nothing. The news leaks slowly over months and years. It reaches the other generals in fragments, through rumor and intermediary. By the time it is confirmed, by the time everyone knows that Alexander's son is dead, the political landscape has moved on so far that there is nothing any of them can do, or chooses to do, about it. The last heir of Alexander the Great is dead in a fortress at age 13. His mother is dead beside him. The Arged line, the royal house of Macedon that traced its ancestry to Heracles, that had ruled for 300 years, that produced Philip II and Alexander the Great, is gone. What remains of the empire is no longer an empire. It is a set of competing kingdoms, each run by a man who was once a general, each calling himself king, each fighting the others for whatever they can hold. There is one more attempt to put it back together. Antigonus Monophthalmus is still fighting. He has been fighting since the beginning. He outlasted Perdiccas. He defeated Eumenes. He has expanded his control through Asia Minor, Syria, Mesopotamia, and significant portions of the former Persian heartland. By 306 BC he controls more territory than any single successor, and he makes a decision that changes the nature of the game. He declares himself king. Not king of Phrygia, not satrapal governor, king, Basileus, the title unmodified. Antigonus, king of Macedon and Asia. The claim is explicit. He is the successor to Alexander, the ruler of the unified empire, the man who can put it back together. His son Demetrius, brilliant, charismatic, reckless in the specific way that makes soldiers love a man, is declared co-king. The other generals understand immediately what is being claimed. They respond in kind within months. Ptolemy declares himself king of Egypt. Seleucus declares himself king of Asia. Lysimachus declares himself king of Thrace and later Macedon. Cassander declares himself king of Macedon. The fiction is formally over. No one is administering Alexander's empire. They are all ruling their own kingdoms that happen to be carved from it. But Antigonus does not accept fragmentation. He has spent over 20 years not accepting fragmentation. He is not stopping now. He assembles the largest army he can. He calls Demetrius to his side. He prepares for the battle that has been building for 2 decades. Central Anatolia, a place called Ipsus. We are not precisely sure where. Somewhere in modern Turkey, in the flat agricultural land of Phrygia. A battlefield large enough for tens of thousands of men, and something new, something that changes the outcome in a way no one fully anticipates. Elephants. Seleucus, in a deal that history does not record in enough detail, negotiated with Chandragupta Maurya, the Indian emperor, the founder of the Maurya dynasty, a man who had driven Alexander's garrisons out of the Indus Valley, a trade agreement. In exchange for territory in the eastern provinces, Seleucus received 500 war elephants. War elephants are not simply large animals on a battlefield. They are psychological weapons. They terrify horses. A cavalry charge will not go through a line of war elephants. The horses refuse. They are mobile platforms for archers. They are battering rams against formations. Seleucus has brought them to Ipsus. Antigonus has perhaps 80 elephants, captured or bred over years of campaigning. He is outnumbered on that axis. The battle begins. Demetrius, commanding his father's cavalry on the right flank, does what he does brilliantly. He charges. He breaks through the enemy cavalry opposite him. He drives them from the field. And then he pursues. This is Demetrius's flaw, the specific, well-documented, consistently fatal flaw of an otherwise exceptional commander. He pursues past the point of strategic usefulness, chasing fleeing cavalry while the main battle develops without him. When he turns back, Seleucus has moved the elephants into the gap between Demetrius and his father's main infantry line. The elephants form a barrier, an impassable barrier. Demetrius cannot get back. Antigonus is surrounded. He is 81 years old. He has been fighting for this, for one unified empire, held together under one authority, spanning the world Alexander built, for 22 years. He stands in the middle of his surrounded infantry and looks across the field for Demetrius. He waits. The cavalry does not come. The javelins come instead. Antigonus falls on the field at Ipsus, covered in wounds, still looking for his son. His last words, according to one account, were that he had expected Demetrius to come. After Ipsus, the idea of one empire is finished. Not weakened. Not deferred. Finished. The world that Alexander left behind has become 3 distinct successor states, plus the rump of Macedonia, plus Thrace, plus dozens of smaller kingdoms filling the margins. Egypt under Ptolemy, and it will remain under his dynasty for nearly 300 years, one of the longest-lasting successor states. It will be a center of learning, of culture, of trade. The Library of Alexandria, the Pharos Lighthouse, Euclid and Eratosthenes and Archimedes. The last Ptolemaic ruler will be a woman named Cleopatra, and the manner of its ending will be its own story. The Seleucid Empire under Seleucus, the largest of the successor states, stretching from Syria to the borders of India at its height. Seleucus will survive all the other original Diadochi. He will be the last one standing. He will be murdered in 281 BC in Thrace, just before he might finally have claimed Macedonia as well, by a man he had welcomed as a guest. He outlasts everyone and still does not win. Macedonia, chaotic for a generation after Cassander's line fails, eventually passing to Demetrius's descendants, then to Antigonus Gonatas, grandson of the Onid. It will remain a kingdom until Rome takes it in 168 BC and makes it a province. Lysimachus will die at the Battle of Corupedium in 281 BC fighting Seleucus. He is the second to last of the original Diadochi. Seleucus is murdered 6 months later. The world that 13 years of Alexander's campaigns created lasted, as a single political unit, approximately 2 weeks. The arguing started before the body was cold. The killing started within months. The bloodline of Alexander was gone within 13 years. What took Alexander 13 years to build, from the crossing of the Hellespont in 334 BC to his death in 323 BC, took his generals 13 years to unmake. Here is the thing that stays with you, long after you've learned the names and the battles and the dates. None of these men were simple villains. Ptolemy built something real. The dynasty he founded kept the torch of Greek learning alive for 3 centuries. The Library of Alexandria, the greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world, was his project, carried on by his successors. The ideas preserved there shaped mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and literature for generations. Whatever you think of how he got there, what he built was extraordinary. Seleucus created a state that genuinely bridged Greek and Persian civilization. Persian administrative traditions blending with Hellenistic culture, trade flowing along routes from the Mediterranean to India, a cosmopolitan intellectual world that neither Alexander nor anyone before him had achieved. Even Cassander, cold, calculating, murderous Cassander, built a functioning kingdom. He maintained order. He founded cities. Thessalonica, named after his wife, Alexander's half-sister, is still there, still a city, still inhabited, its name still carrying the echo of the world he moved through. They were not nihilists. They were not destroyers by nature. They were men doing what men in their position have always done, in every culture, under every political system. They competed. They calculated what they needed, weighed what it would cost, and paid that cost without flinching. Olympia's was a cost. Roxana was a cost. Alexander IV was a cost. The empire was a cost. Loyalty was a cost. They paid it all, and they kept clear accounts. What Alexander had, the specific thing that none of them could manufacture, or transfer, or divide at a conference table, was something the ancient world did not have a word for. He had the genuine belief of the people around him, not their calculated loyalty which shifts with circumstances, not their performance of devotion which collapses under pressure, their actual deep, unreasonable conviction that following him was worth every sacrifice the following required. The moment that belief needed to attach to someone new, the moment the room was asked who among you is worthy to hold what he held, there was no answer that satisfied anyone. There can only ever be one answer to that question, and it is always a specific human being with a specific face and a specific voice and a specific history, and it cannot be transferred, and it cannot be inherited, and when it is gone absolutely. The empire did not fail because of bad men. It failed because it was built for one man, and one man is always eventually mortal. The world Alexander made was always going to end this way. The generals simply determined how long it took and how much blood it cost. The answer was 40 years and more blood than anyone counted. The kingdoms that rose from Alexander's ruins did not end quietly either. Ptolemaic Egypt, the last one standing, the longest survivor, fell in 30 BC to a Roman general named Octavian. He walked into Alexandria, stood over Alexander's tomb, and looked down at the man who had built everything Octavian was now taking. He became the first Roman emperor 6 years later.